Hey, what's going on? It's pattern recognition number 9. Yeah, record-setting pace, I know. Can't believe how efficient I am. Just kidding. But okay, so what do we have now? Well, the other day I was watching the Butcher play on the Chessbra stream. And he was playing viewers, and here he's playing against a 1200 who just made the right move, knight to d2. And, well, talking to the streamers, it seems like the Butcher was distracted and played queen g5. But he got lucky, because after queen e4, he delivered checkmate and won the game. But I was screaming at the screen. Screaming at the screen? Screaming at the screen when I saw this. And why? Well, because he played queen e4 and got mated. But of course, he had a nice move there, which I was screaming for. So knight d2 was a good move because it set up this nice pattern. And the move is queen e1. That's what I should have played. After queen e1, it's a draw. White naturally takes the queen, rook takes, the king has only one square, and then we give a perpetual with a knight, which is the theme of this video, knight perpetuals. So the knight is going to jump back between g3 and f1, and there's absolutely nothing that white can do. And it's important to note that the knight can jump to d2, e3, or g3. It's equal. So this is the skeleton of our theme. The rook is on, well, could be a queen as well, on the first rank, and the knight jumps back and forth, giving checks, one of them being a discovered check, and the other one a check on the, in this case, f1 square. So the knight can jump to e3 or d2 like we see here, and that can be important. The rook can be anywhere on the first rank really, the rook or the queen, depending on which one. But let's see an example. If the rook is attacked here on e1, as in this case, then we need to use the knight to block the e-file. So knight e3 check would be the correct move in this case. So we give the checks, and the same would apply if our rook was on the d-file and it was attacked by another rook. Then we can play knight d2, blocking, and the rook is free, so the king must move, and then we go back and forth. So let's see some game examples of this pattern. Here we have Kramnik with the white pieces. He's playing against Wang Hao. And as we can see, the rooks on the 7th are quite annoying here, and white is being threatened with the mates in 1 here. So Kramnik had to use our pattern here to wiggle out of this one. Play rook b8 check, and this sets up our knight perpetual here. The king must go back, etc. Back and forth, and the draw was agreed. Simple example of this in action. Another quick example here, former world champion Vasily Smyslov had the white pieces, and he's facing some problems here because the d pawn is about the queen, but as we now know, he has the easy solution. I like how the knight jumped here from d8 to e6. The king has to go to h7 and on knight f8. Of course, blocking the king escape to g6, and then the knight works in mysterious ways on this circuit, as we know, and a draw was agreed. Here is a game by Capablanca with white. This was played in a simul, and he's facing some problems after rook c8, which was black's last move. We can see that the black rook is about to penetrate to c2 if needed, and if the knight were to move, bishop h3 is looming with some weaknesses around the white king. So this could be problematic, but Capablanca found a nice solution to end the game peacefully. A little combination. Can you figure it out? Assuming you paused and came back. He took on e6, undermining the defense of the rook on c8, so black has no choice but to take on c5. And here the idea was, of course, not to recapture the rook on c5, but to play rook h8 check, and we set up this by now familiar knight perpetual here with knight f8 to g6. And this game was, of course, drawn. Drew? The last example that we're going to look at is quite nice because it brings together this theme, this knight perpetual, and another knight perpetual, which is actually what we'll look at next. But here in Shulman against Gariev in the US Championship, Shulman played an interesting move here. Gariev just played rook d4, attacked the white queen. But now Shulman played the unexpected knight g6. A very nice move. Now, if black takes the queen, we know that by now, then he can play rook to e8, king goes to h7, and we've set up the knight perpetual. So this is a draw. However, that's not what Gariev played. After knight g6, he played king h7. So now the queen is attacked and the knight, but it turns out he can continue checking here in another way on this circuit, and this is different because going back and forth here. This is different because there's no discovered check. It's just the knight giving checks, but the king doesn't have to go to g8. It can also go to h8 as he did. But he can anyway go back to g6, which is quite nice, because if he takes, there's rook g8 check, rook e8 check, followed by queen g8 mate. So quite nice how tactics are used there to intertwine some cool patterns. So after king h8 and knight g6, there's nothing to be done. He's gonna give him a perpetual check on this circuit, and that's all she wrote. And the score sheets were shined with the now familiar draw. So this pattern in the last game, which Schulman used, kind of reminded me of this kind of perpetual check, where the king can't go anywhere, there's a check, and the knight also happens to cover this square. So the king must go to the corner, and now knight g6, and back and forth. And this is a cool, useful pattern as well. And we'll look at a few examples of this one. So by far the coolest example I found using this theme was this one. At 2300 rated player had the white pieces, and Polish grandmaster Bartosz Szoczko had the black pieces, and he played rook to b3. Now white managed to force a draw here with a very nice move, knight to h4. And the point of this is that black doesn't have time for knight e7 to block the perpetual check, because the rook on b3 is now attacked, because he opened up the discovery for the rook on g3. So black is kind of forced to take on e3, but then we have knight to g6. After takes, we have this this circuit here, knight f8 to g6 check with a perpetual. So this game ends peacefully. Quite often it's difficult for the king to be as cramped as in our last example, where well, we do have it on the white side now, but in that case there was a bishop blocking here. But this pattern also happens with perhaps another piece occupying, protecting the square, the escape square for the king. So here with the queen protecting g1, after b5, white could have played knight e4 if he wanted to play for a win, but after b5, this perpetual check is on. And since the king can't go to g1, we can keep checking. And a peaceful result. Here is another one. And yeah, this one kind of funny because black should be winning his upper piece here. But he played knight g3. And after king h2, knight to f1 check. So now if the king goes back to h1, the perpetual check is on, since we're covering g1 with the bishop. And there's a nice point here if white were to take. He can't do that, then another pattern, attacking pattern, bishop, discovery here. And once the king protects, we come in on the other side and undermine the queen. And we win it. So white is forced to play king h1, and then the knight checks. Knight f1, knight g3. And yeah, I found this a little bit amusing because black is winning, but there's an explanation. Kismatulin had white and Kobalia had black, and this was the World Cup. So in all likelihood, this was round 4, game 1.4. So this was the fourth game, and it seems that Kobalia needed a draw to secure his place in the next round, and that's why he forced a draw here instead of playing for a win. This next one, it's very important. It crops up a lot. So we have like the basic skeleton here. The knight moves in to f6. And here, of course, you should be familiar with the Arabian mate. If the king goes to the corner, which it won't, but if it does, of course, it's going to get mated. The Arabian mate, rook to h7. This was covered in a previous pattern recognition video. So the king goes to f8, but here white can force the perpetual. The king runs knight f6, covering the rook on d7, and perpetual. The important thing here is the placement of the white rook. It is on d7, and therefore it's blocking the black king from going to d8 and escaping via the d file. And also it's covered by the knight there on f6. So very important, you often see this pattern where the rook must be played to d7 first before you can try to force the perpetual, otherwise the king would escape. And who better to demonstrate this in action than every Russian schoolboy knows? Okay, Alexander Molinsky. So here, okay, it's very, I know, must play knight f6. Okay, check, king must move. King go to corner, it's checkmate, you know, Arabian mate, every Russian schoolboy knows. So king f8, no, very important. Rook d7, the rook must be on the d file, why? I already told you. Rook is attacked, doesn't matter. Knight h7, it's a draw. So in Ermolinsky against Benjamin, the game was agreed a draw. If the king moves to e8, knight f6 check, and we see that the king can't go to the d file. Knowing this pattern, the rook on the d file on d7, this perpetual is on, and very important, Ermolinsky saved a draw here. Yeah, every Russian schoolboy knows. Another example, a much older one. Here we have Blackburn with white, and Joseph Henry Blackburn. And black was Amos Byrne of the Burnley variation. And he's down a pawn here, and white has the bishop pair, so he's struggling. But he found the best chance to fight, rook d2. And this means that the rook can't really move from the third rank for white, because then knight f3 is on. And that's actually what happened. Bishop d3, black played f5. And here, white moved his rook from the third rank, gave a check, and took an f5. But of course, this allows us to come in with the perpetual knight circuit, knight f3, king f1, knight h2, etc. The king is caught in the perpetual net of the knight. So a nice save by Amos Byrne. Here we see a more modern example. This is Bartłomiej Maseja with white. He's a Polish grandmaster. And his opponent, Alexander Moisenko, the very strong Ukrainian, he has a lot of pawns for the knight. And seems like he's about to win the pawn on b4, for example. So it's interesting to see how he set up our pattern here. He played knight to g5. And with the knight covering these two squares, we're threatening mate. And here black decided to play g6. If he moves the king to f8, then we can start taking pawns, maybe on c7, and then the knight can move into e6, maybe pick up the g7 pawns, and we're getting a lot of pawns. But this allows the knight to go to the f6 square. So now the knight retreated back to e4, and now after black gobbles up the pawn on b4, he's got 5 pawns for the knight. So white decided to force matters here with this very important perpetual knight pattern. So we covered the 3 basic patterns that I kind of thought of for this video, but I have some extra examples which are kind of, mixing and matching ideas. Here we have a game with Alexander Motilev with black to move. Played knight f3 check, utilizing the pin on the knight. So the king must move. If it goes to e2, we have a discovery. And quite often, these knight perpetuals have some discovered checks that mean that the king is kind of forced in one way. Here the queen would be lost, so king f1 must be played, which happens in the game. But then knight takes h2. The queen covers the g file, so the king must go back. So we have this back and forth here. And a draw. Here's a somewhat similar example from Pablo Riccardi against Judith Polgar. Knight f6 was played, check, and putting the king on either g7 or h8 leads to the loss of the queen. With this discovery, king h8, also knight d7. So the king must go to f8. And actually we had the perpetual here, very similar to the other one. Like this. The difference here is that the king might go to e7 in this position. But then white gets a very dangerous attack, probably a winning one, with, for instance, now the threat bishop g4 check and queen b6 mate. And Polgar didn't fancy this. All the white pieces are active, and white should probably win. So a draw was the result. And I think fittingly we will end with Kasparov against Karpov. Titanic battle. And this one was drawn after knight e7 and king f8. Another simple circuit. The king can't go to the e file. The queen is covering everything there. King g8, we give another check. The king can't go to h7 because of the bishop. If you go to h8, we have this. And note that the king can't go to h7. We could keep on checking with knight e7 and then going back to the perpetual, but we can also play knight e5 and win the queen. So black is forced to stay on g8, and then it's back and forth. So yeah. So these were the patterns I wanted to show you. Was inspired, like I said, by the video of the butcher. And who knows, I hope you learned from this. And if you're in the shoes of our friend from the beginning, the 1200 rated player playing the butcher, you will not miss your chance if you get it. So yeah, we had these 3 basic patterns the knight f1 check with the rook or the queen, and then the tricky one with knight g1 f3, knight f1 to g3. The king was kind of smothered, and then the well, kind of the cousin of the Arabian Maid, and then some assortments. If you can think of some further examples, point them out. You can contact me, put them in the comments, and we'll work from there. Thank you for watching this, guys. Bye bye.